Hey guys, welcome back. So this past week I've just basically been hunkered down at home because two reasons. My boyfriend's really sick. There's like a cold or flu that's going around. I'm still okay so far, but we're kind of just holed up at home. The second reason is that we got a big dump of snow, which for Vancouver standards, this kind of basically shuts the city down. Like it's like this much snow. So the rest of Canada is fine. Vancouver, we don't know how to deal with it. So I've been taking this opportunity to catch up on a lot of chores that I've been putting off for a long time. Like the ones that I really don't enjoy doing, like wiping shelves down, going through all my props and like chucking out the dead ones and like recycling the soil. And so sanitizing, like getting all the leftover soil together, baking it in the oven for a little bit. I've gone through my bin of pots that are like dirty from repots. I just keep it all in a box and then I do all the dishes all at once, dry them, put them back. So now we're at like the few repots that I have legitimately been putting off for, no joke, probably more than 6 months. I don't know what it is that like makes me really, I just don't want to touch it. There's a mental block there. I don't want to do it. So while I'm doing all these chores that I don't want to do, they're like kind of like, hello. So we're going to tackle them together. There's not a lot of them. There's 4 plants that I need to deal with, and we're gonna do it and we're gonna feel good about ourselves, and then we're gonna go back to hunkering down on the couch and watch Squid Games, which I finally started watching, like legit, not the new season. I just watched the first season. So what I think I'm gonna do is rather than like go through all the repots all at once and introduce all the plants to you, I'm just gonna go through the actual task of dealing with whatever that needs to be dealt with, and you'll see the plant then. So the first one is actually not an anthurium. It is this plant that desperately needs a moss pole extension, which I hate doing moss pole extensions. I don't like moss poles, not for what they do. They do the thing that they need to do, right? They size up the plant. This is the newest leaf. It's absolutely stunning and it's like just way too tall. I hate moss poles just because of like, I resent the work that they create. I'm just peeling some sheaths here. So at this point in my life, I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4 moss poles in my whole house. And I intend to keep it that way. Less would be even better. Maybe 0 one day. Usually when a climbing plant gets to this size, like as in this height where I need to extend the pole, that's when I chop the top off and then I sell the top and I keep the bottom for myself. But then this one just seems a bit different because these fenestrations is the whole reason why I got this plant. The only downside is that look how leggy it is. Well, I mean, I guess as a plant, it's very viney and the internodal spacing is quite tall. So I think part of why I've been putting this off for so long is not just because I don't like moss poles and dealing with them and watering them and extending them. It's also because like I had to make a tough decision on, am I going to allow this plant to get even taller or chop it and do what I normally do, which is like kind of reset it back to 0 again. I just feel a little bit different about this one. It's just been doing so well in my living room. This just lives behind my dining table and it's living under a Russo light. I've had it for like a year and a half and we started as a bottom cutting, an imported bottom cutting at that, and it was like the newest leaf was, I think it's all gone. The import leaves, I think I might have chopped them off because they had this weird like dotty like damage on it from the import and probably what they sprayed it with. But starting from this and getting to this is pretty gratifying. I just don't think I have the vertical space to keep it growing and going taller and taller. So this is its last little extension, or its first and last extension, and we're going to chop it after that. And luckily I do have some more moss poles. I probably have more moss poles than I'll ever use in this lifetime. Oh, and I forgot to say, this moss pole is not really just moss. There's some chopped up sphagnum moss in here, and then the rest is like soily, perlite. I think I used tree fern soil. It hasn't massively rooted into it, but there is like one big root right here. I don't water this very often. So my moss hole filling recipe has changed quite a bit over the years, but it's like, it kind of ended up being moss mainly to kind of bulk it up, and because I had sphagnum moss to get through because I don't use it for planting plants in anymore. I really only use it for poles sometimes and also for shipping some plants sometimes. So the moss is kind of like a filler, and then I use a general like aeroid mix. I'm just gonna quickly build this pole and then I'm gonna show you exactly what I mix into my filling. I think I'm gonna leave these little feet on just because I think it will stabilize it a little bit more. I think some people cut the feet off when they're extending like this, but I think this might work better. I think this will be a little bit more stable. Like yeah, this seems quite stable. I'm just gonna secure this to the pole first before we mix up our substrate. I feel like that's not the order people normally do it in, but it's been so long since I've done a moss pole. I feel like that'll be fine. It'll be messy, but it'll be fine. Okay, plant is secured, ready for substrate. So we're just gonna mix in here because whatever we need for the pole, I think should all fit in here. So I don't want to use a ton of moss. I'm just going to break it up into strands, and I'm doing this dry because it is a little bit easier to break. There's less elasticity in the moss, and I'm going to chop it up into small pieces so it can disperse a little bit evenly because I don't want the really hydrophobic like chunks of moss in the pole. I've heard people use immersion blenders for this, and I'm curious, like, for those of you who've done it, let me know if like it's done any damage to your immersion blender. I don't plan on using my immersion blender for it because I also use it for food, and I don't really want to use it for moss. Even though it's like a non-porous material, you can like properly clean it and stuff. I don't know. Okay, so I wouldn't do it for moss because I just don't work with moss enough to warrant like ruining an immersion blender with it. But I have considered using one for tree fern and milling it down to an even size. And tree fern is so much more hard than sphagnum moss. So if you've done it with tree fern, I'm curious to know. Because I also considered buying a cheap immersion blender just to do that with, but I don't really want to buy like a single use, like single purpose appliance. Do you know what I mean? Especially if there's potential that the tree fern will actually break it and then it will be like such a waste. Okay, so this I think is good. Just so you can get a sense of the size. And then in this bin, I have aroid mix, which is, there's no tree fern in it. So there's soil, perlite, and bark in there. I thought of using my tree fern soil for this, but I honestly don't think it's worth it. Like the tree fern is good because it does allow water to pass through without beating off the sides, but this soil should do as well because the soil part of the soil is not peat moss, which peat moss does get really hydrophobic. This is like composty soil. So I'm thinking it probably will let water pass through. Now that it's all mixed up, I feel like I might have underdid the moss a little bit because this is what it looks like right now. I'm gonna add a little bit more moss and then I'm going to dampen it so it doesn't fall apart. Okay, I think this is looking a lot more closer to what I wanted. It's maybe a little bit like barky for my liking, but you know what, it's fine. Here's where we start to make a real big mess. It's gonna be really hard to show you everything because it's so tall. You know, one thing I don't even own is a funnel. A funnel would actually, oh, wait, what if we made a funnel? I have this plastic sheet that I used to make, I used to make lazy moss poles with it. What if I did a little something like this? You can't see it right now, but I think it might work. Okay, I'm gonna tape it like this. Okay, so this might be our little funnel. Okay, let me just, you guys can witness either glory or mayhem. Oh, but when I push it down, it closes the funnel. Okay, we'll have to hold. Oh my gosh, I broke my funnel. Okay, we're just got to be careful of not shoving it in. That's what she said. Let's see if it works. It works. Oh, we got cloggage. I am making kind of a mess, but this is less of a mess than without the funnel, I think. I'm so proud of my funnel. There are obviously pieces that are falling out the front of the moss pole, but the majority of it's gonna stay inside. And we can just top up the rest. Okay, we're all filled up now. So it is a little bit wobbly, but one thing I do need to do is kind of top up the soil a little bit because this root it's still alive. As you can see, I peeled the sheath off a little bit. There's like nice green, healthy tissue down there. It needs to go in. I tried to shove it into the pot, but obviously it wasn't getting enough moisture, so it didn't root into the pot. But if it did, this would be a nice place to cut it in the future. But also like this would help anchor the pole as well. So I'm just topping up the pot a little bit because the soil line has dropped over the last year. Hopefully this will encourage that aerial root to keep going. I mean, watering the plant every now and then would also encourage aerial roots to keep growing. Okay, well that was not as painful as I thought it would be. The only thing that needs done now is we gotta water this pole. Let's see how the water passes through. It is beating, but I do see it traveling down the middle too. I totally forgot to dampen the moss ball filling before filling it. Oh well. But the pot itself was quite dry, so the whole plant needs watering anyway. Okay, that is one big weight off my shoulders. I can now stop looking at this plant in my living room with like just bare naked in the sky. You got a support now, and we can move on to the next task. Okay, next up is a much more pleasant task in my eyes, and that is to repot my monkey tail cactus. I don't remember if I ever showed this. I don't think I showed this to you when I first got it. I got two at the same time. So one was like a single stump and it sprouted five little growth points, and it looked like Sideshow Bob. And I gave that one to Charmaine, and I kept this one, which is two separate cuttings. And when I got it, it was kind of starting to root, I think. And I just kept it in this tree fern soil and waited for it to root, and it's obviously rooted. There's all these roots down here. And this little cup has like holes snipped into the bottom, which I didn't do, which has been kind of annoying to water, but luckily this plant is like super easy. It's never been like really shrivelly. I don't give it enough light to make it like nice and fat. It grows on my shelf with like just Monios T8 grow lights. I've thought of cutting it right here, so it'll just be like a nice little fat monkey tail, and then reroot this and just grow another one out of here. But for now, I don't think I have the energy to, so I want to pot it directly into, maybe not this one, one kind of grows with algae, but like pot it directly into the equivalent size in tree fern soil, or like keep the tree fern soil that it's in, just top it up with a bit more, with a bit of a layer at the bottom. I find that with succulents and cacti, that's been my best, like no drainage has been my best way of keeping them alive, because I never water my cacti and succulents, like maybe once every 6 weeks, maybe. And so like if they're in a terracotta pot or a pot with drainage and it's in like a really gritty, rocky soil mix, I can never get them properly hydrated. So they just kind of start shrinking and shrinking away until they're nothing. But if there's no drainage, they can actually like absorb it a little bit more. I have to be careful with how much I water, but this has been my best way of keeping them alive. Okay, new pot with leca. And let's see if I can get you out in one piece. If you don't own cacti because you're afraid of them spiking you, this plant will not, well, I've yet to get spiked by this plant. And I've touched it, not really like aggressively, but I've touched it from all different directions and it's been fine. It has not embedded into my skin. And this plant has grown surprisingly fast, because I think I got this like, I want to say maybe 6 to 9 months ago. And it was just like an unrooted cutting then, and it's grown basically all of this since then on this cutting, and then all of this on this cutting, which is more than I can say for any of my other arid plants. And from what I could tell of all the cuttings, because basically the story behind this is my friend Jesse, who's Blue Dakota on Instagram, he had a humongous, massive basket of it. I think the whole basket fell over, so all these pieces broke off of it. So he just had all these cuttings and everything started growing right away. I think they probably started growing before they even had roots, which is pretty remarkable. So seeing the success rate on all those broken little pieces of monkey tail made me pretty confident that if I ever wanted to cut it in the future and reroot it, it wouldn't take as long and it wouldn't be as risky, because, you know, I always get a little bit intimidated by cutting cacti because of the amount of time that you're supposed to callus it for. And like, how much you have to control the water after you plant it up to make sure you don't rot it. And I've definitely rotted cacti cuttings before in the past. It obviously goes against every instinct you have as like a tropical plant owner, whereas the monkey tail just seemed like a really seamless and easy process. Also, when I first showed this plant, there were multiple people who said that it was so easy and it does great in like a soily soil, you know, like almost like a tropical soil. The only annoying thing about this is that like substrate and stuff will all get caught in the hairs. So it does look kind of dangly and like it's just missing a little bit of bushiness, but I kind of like how creepy it looks in a way. But I do think I'm going to cut it here and add another piece into the pot. I don't see it branching on its own. Do these things really branch without being cut? But before we forget, we're going to hit it with some great white really quick, not a ton, just a little bit. It's running into the bottom. No, that's perfect actually. The pot is still quite light, but there's a little bit to be wicked up from the bottom. I almost think I need like a tiny little comb to brush out the perlite that's embedded into the fur. Anyways, this one is finally done. It's going back on my living room shelf. Okay, the last two. Honestly, I've been dreading doing this because I'm afraid that they're dying. So this first one is my beautiful anthurium beechii. So this one has been actively dying for a long time, ever since I moved it out of this room to my living room. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I let it completely dry out a few times. It completely defoliated. The top growth point is dead. I do see some roots that appear to be alive, but I want to get the whole thing out, cut off whatever is dead at the top and replant it. I think I'm going to replant it into something much smaller. I've definitely had cuttings where like the roots appear to be alive, but the whole stem is dead. And I just don't really know why. This plant has never been the easiest anthurium for me, contrary to, well, this was a narrow form veitchii. I do think they're a little bit more difficult than the regular form veitchii, but then you see people like Tyler from Russo Plants growing these massive things, seemingly like with no effort whatsoever, and you wonder what's wrong with your specimen. I've had this since 2020, and this is where we're at. Like I've cut it, I think once, near around 2020, 2021, and I haven't cut it since then. Why? Why? Okay, so these roots are definitely alive. I am shocked at how little the stem is. Can you even see it? It's like this long. Either that's how little it's grown for me in the last few years, or the whole bottom part of it rotted off. Which one is it? Okay, so if I feel the bottom, mushy. I just broke the whole bottom off and this is the inside of it. It's like spongy, dead. This feels like it weighs nothing. I honestly think it's dead. Yeah, I'm 99% sure it's dead. Let me get scissors. I'm gonna just cut a piece and see if there's any live tissue inside. Nope, that's dead and woody. It's also kind of squishy. Cut it again. This thing's dead. Look at down to the last half a centimeter. It's totally dead. Well, it just goes to show. Look at this root. It's like live root. There's fuzzies on it. I think I'm just more annoyed because I've had that plant for so long and it's like supposedly an easy one and I just killed it with nothing to show for it in terms of knowledge. Like, what did I learn? I didn't learn anything from that. What do you guys think? So I will tell you that I definitely let it dry out completely, like beyond dry, like 100% dry, at least a couple times in the last 6 to 9 months. I've been keeping it downstairs in ambient in near to a grow light. It's getting light from the Russo pendant light, but it's not getting direct light. Like I would say the Burley Marcus Flame gets the majority of like the biggest impact from that light. And then this one's kind of like down below. And then prior to that, it was living like literally right here. It's grown a few leaves in that spot and I decided to move it downstairs because I was making room for other things. So the only thing I can think of is that I let it dry out completely, but also veitchii are pretty well known for being pretty drought tolerant. Maybe not as drought tolerant as, say, a clarinervium, but pretty drought tolerant in general as far as anthurium go. I did really like that plant, which is, I'm sad about it. It's not like my favorite anthurium of all time, but I did really like it. Anyway, I'm just pulling out all the dead root that I can see, which there wasn't a ton because they were alive, so they all kind of stayed together. And then I can gather this up to be sterilized. So basically the last time it had actual foliage was in around Christmas time. And I remember Charmaine was here watering and she texted me a photo of it and she was like, I didn't do this. Like, this plant was already like this when I got here. And I was like, I know, like, it's been dropping leaves for a while. Leave it. Like, I was way too overwhelmed before I left to really take a good look at it. So it might have been that it had stem rot then and I just didn't catch it in time. The moral of the story is if you have the capacity and the time, just get to it sooner. Okay, the next one, very similar story, maybe not as far along, probably not dead, but it certainly looks like it's dying. This is my anthurium luxurians, which I've had for so long. I want to say I've had it since oh, active growth point. Okay, if I'm looking at this, there's a lot of roots. Now, we learned from the last one that even though you see a lot of roots, doesn't mean the plant is alive. But if I'm peeling back all this sheath, you can definitely see that the stem is alive. I am 99% sure that this is due to it being completely dry routinely, and then like I just drown it with water and it gets a bunch of edema which rots the leaf, and that's why I think luxurians and luxurians hybrids are not that easy. I'm just digging down a little bit, feeling the stem, it's super firm. Okay, maybe I don't need to repot this, but what I will do is I'm going to cut this leaf off because it makes me very sad, and this is going to go into a dome, or not a dome, like a bin. I will pop it into this cache pot though. This thing has been really up and down. I got it as a little stem prop from Indonesia of all places. This was before Tropicals was selling it. And it was like the leaves maybe this big. This was back when luxurians was like $500 USD if you were to buy it off Facebook from private sellers and stuff like that. And then when Tropicals first introduced it, I think they were selling them at 500 and then it quickly dropped to like 250. So I think I got this for like 200 USD, which I thought at the time was a bargain. And then nowadays you can barely give them away. But I also think that I like luxurians a little bit more than 99% of luxurians hybrids. So I would be sad to lose this. Now I'm going to just try to rehab it inside of high humidity, lowish light. I don't think that being in the living room is doing it any favors, but since it is quite rooted, I think this leaf should come back quite nicely. I might also put it inside of an exo because it would actually have the vertical height to grow the next leaf, because it's not like a small plant anymore. It's probably like leaves maybe about this big. I think this is gonna go into an exo actually after further thought. Anyways, that is it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do think that was quite a short video. Honestly, it's been quite a challenge for me trying to fit in longer filming days, longer editing days, just like committing to longer videos just because of my schedule lately. So I do appreciate everyone who's been sticking around, even though I know you do appreciate the long ones. But thank you so much for watching this one. I do hope you enjoyed it. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Mwah.